It was 2 years ago that Senator Booker and Congressman Pasquarello and I led an all-hands-on-deck opioid summit here at St. Joe's with healthcare professionals from the hospital and beyond, addiction treatment experts, law enforcement, mental health advocates, the broad universe of stakeholders in the battle against opioid addiction. And in many ways, the physicians here at St. Joe's are on the front lines. More than 170,000 patients came to the emergency room behind me last year. This is by far the busiest ER in New Jersey and the fourth busiest in the entire nation. These doctors and nurses know what they're talking about. Many of their patients arrive in severe pain. Some have broken bones, others are in cardiac arrest, suffer severe burns, you name it. And that's the operative word here. They're here in pain. And one of the best ways to stem the opioid epidemic is to aggressively invest in measures that prevent addiction. Here at St. Joe's, they understand it starts with how you treat the pain, and they saw an opportunity in their very own ER to prevent opioid addiction. Because more often than not, it's people in pain getting hooked on painkillers in their own medicine cabinets prescribed by their own doctors that lead to addiction. Percocet, OxyContin, Vicodin, and others. 4 out of 5 new heroin users started out initially misusing pain pills. And now we have to deal with the often deadly effects of synthetic fentanyl, which can be up to 50 times more potent than heroin. We're in the midst of a national crisis, one that's grown exponentially. Too many New Jerseyans have fallen victim to addiction. Too many lives have been lost. Too many families have been torn apart. The opioid epidemic doesn't discriminate by age or race or gender or socioeconomic status. In fact, it's hard to meet any New Jerseyan who hasn't been touched by this crisis in some way. Over the last 15 years, we've seen a parallel increase in the amount of opioids being prescribed and the number of people who suffer from opioid addiction. And while many opioid prescriptions are issued to deal with legitimate pain, the dangerous nature of these drugs leads to dependency, to addiction, or sometimes, more tragically, an overdose. That's why Dr. Rosenberg and his team here at St. Joe's are doing such an incredible job. Their Alternatives to Opioids initiative, or ALTO, is making an impact. Since becoming the first emergency department in the nation to use alternative to opioids to treat acute pain, curb opioid exposure, and eliminate the possibility of addiction in just 2 years, St. Joe's has cut opioid prescriptions in their emergency rooms by 82%, successfully addressing our nation's and our state's opioid addiction crisis requires us to be creative, to think outside of the box about not how to only serve those individuals battling an addiction, and we should, but to effectively prevent addiction in the first place. So St. Joe's Alto program is at the forefront of innovative thinking and new approaches to treating pain. And I think that's the type of effort that New Jersey has long had a history of being known that New Jersey makes and the world takes. Well, we're happy that hopefully the rest of the nation can take the significant progress made here through the Alto program. For years now, we have been fighting an uphill battle in Washington to ramp up the federal response to America's opioid epidemic and better support the work of organizations here in New Jersey on the front lines of this crisis. In 2016, I helped pass the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, known as CARA, but I was frustrated that it never received the proper resources necessary to fight an opioid epidemic as severe as ours. That's why I'm pleased that because we stood up in the budget battle with the president, Senator Booker on my side, Congressman Pasquarello in the House, and saying, no, we're not going to vote for a budget that increases our defense, which certainly we need for the national security, but for the national health, we also need to be able to deal with domestic issues at the same time. And that's why I'm pleased that the budget that we passed in February includes $6 billion in additional funding specifically for fighting the opioid crisis. That's $6 billion. $6 billion that will not just go to addiction treatment and recovery and mental health care, which is all important, but to also relapse prevention, education, and training that helps recovery addicts build their lives and stay on the clear path. And we're going to be fighting like hell to make sure that New Jersey gets its fair share of that $6 billion. I hope that as part of that money, we can have this type of demonstration grant that Senator Booker and Congressman Pasquarelle's legislation, which I've joined with him on, can actually make it happen across the country so that we can see the same results we've seen here at St. Joe's.